So, to no one's surprise, the Federal Reserve has screwed up again. Instead of fighting inflation to the bitter end, they are waving the white flag. Jerome Powell, he just paused hiking rates. Yes, he has done it before in June, and now he's pausing again in September. But it is different today. What Powell did was a hawkish pause. I know that's a very weird term, but let me explain. In our lead story today, the Federal Reserve declines to hike but points to rates staying higher for longer. They have decided to pause their hiking cycle, but they know the truth that inflation is still a massive problem, so they will have to leave rates higher for much longer. And this is what they call a hawkish pause. I personally call it BS because it reveals the truth that the Federal Reserve is afraid and they are frightened about the real strength of the US economy. Listen to Powell's speech at the FOMC. We want to see convincing evidence that we have reached the appropriate level. We need to see more progress before we're willing to reach that conclusion. And it sounds like inflation is still a big problem and it hasn't been tackled yet. And if you look at the Fed's dot plot, you'll realize that this hiking cycle isn't done yet. The majority of the Fed's members wants rates up to at least one more time to 5.75%. So there's still one more rate hike by the end of 2023. But look at the subsequent years. In 2024, rates will still be at 5% on average. By 2026 and beyond, the Federal Reserve wants interest rates to stay between 2.5 to 3% for the long term. This tells us simply that inflation is here to stay, and Powell is trying to stretch the inflation fight longer into the future. Instead of crushing inflation decisively now by hiking, he is using the time stone to kick the can down the road over the next 4 years and beyond. And here's where we stand with rate hikes today. We have gone from near 0% to 5.5% in 18 months. This is well above the 2007 levels just before the great financial crisis, the '08 collapse. Powell knows that despite all the rhetoric from Biden, and even though government spending isn't stopping, the real health of the economy is collapsing. And by not hiking this month, he has essentially shown his hand. And this fear is spreading through the markets. This is not just a Fed pause, it is the pause of doom. And by not hiking plus his hawkish statements, Powell is telling the market that hey, your valuations are now overpriced. We are going to keep rates higher for longer, well into the future. It will be above the rate of inflation, so borrowing costs will stay elevated. And this is why the markets are starting to puke and the prices of stocks and equities are coming down. The S&P 500 had a brutal one-day sell-off, dropping by 3% after realizing the truth, which is a big move for market index. We are not going back to zero interest rates, guys. This won't be business as usual, and whatever prices we give to the stock market, we need to adjust them down. And the Federal Reserve has also clawed back on their soft landing predictions. Powell now admits that a soft landing isn't a baseline case. They are forecasting it, they are praying for one, but an economic crash is still on the cards. And by not hiking, Powell is trading the stability of the economy for prolonged inflation. He has made the deal with the devil. He made the Faustian pact. He is sacrificing purchasing power for positive GDP growth. We need to understand this. And according to the Fed's projections, they expect economic growth to be 2.1% this year before slowing down to 1.5% next year. Unemployment shouldn't go above 4.1% as well. That is a lot of variables Powell is trying to control, and the only way is to leave the economy intact. There's a big underlying rot that we can't really ignore. Government spending is up, they are borrowing endlessly. In fact, the US national debt has hit $33 trillion. This is how ridiculous the situation is. Then we have President Biden trying to run on the economy, Bidenomics, right? Even the mainstream media is turning on him. They are calling him out. The Wall Street Journal is calling it unsustainable. Newsweek says Bidenomics is a complete failure. And that's why we are seeing stocks coming down today. And I don't know how far they could fall. The S&P might drop down to 4,200 or even below 4,000 again. And this is a coming down to earth moment. But here's what's interesting. The price of gold is also sending us a clear signal. While stocks crash by over 3%, gold has actually gone up by 0.3%. Inflation is now going to be a long-term problem, and the price of gold is reflecting it. Gold is pricing in this inflationary disaster by going up. And because inflation will stay hot for longer, the Fed is forced to keep rates above 2.5% until 2027. And that's why stocks are selling down. And this is where we enter a twilight zone moment. Everything in this clown economy is starting to break apart. if the economy is starting to collapse and stocks are starting to fall? What do the textbooks tell us? What do the lords of MMT and Keynesian economics say? That the money should be moving to US bonds, into US treasuries as a safe haven. But things are starting to decouple. The 10-year treasury yield jumped from 5% to almost 5.2% within a matter of hours, which is an incredible move in bonds. When yields spike, this simply means people are dumping their treasury bonds. They are getting out. That causes bond values to crash and yields to go up. Simple enough. But why is this happening? Well, that's because the Federal Reserve has confused the market to the point that everyone is afraid to do anything. And here are the mixed signals that Powell has given us. Firstly, there's still one more rate hike coming in 2023. Remember the dot plot? The majority of the FOMC wants interest rates to hit 5.75%, and that means bond prices will be under further pressure. Then we have the rate pause itself that signals a weakening economy, which could affect the strength of the markets. So people are afraid of buying into stocks and equities as well. Investor money is now floating around in limbo. Investors have no idea what to do, and there's simply nowhere to run that safe. Once again, the Federal Reserve has screwed up. But spiking yields have consequences on the real economy. When yields go up, the cost of borrowing increases for the people on the street. And this is the chart of the prime lending rate. It is what banks charge to lend money to their best customers. It has been going up, up, and up. In August, the prime lending rate is now 8.5%. And because of the Federal Reserve's latest actions, it is likely going to head up in September as well. And this means mortgage loans will be more unaffordable. Car loans will cost more. Commercial real estate repayments will balloon. Even interest rates on credit cards are going to head up. Consumer strength is going to get crushed, especially people on credit cards just trying to stay afloat. Now, credit card interest rates have been going up dramatically since the start of rate hikes. The average APR today is between 20.6% to over 24%, which is absolutely insane. Spiking bond yields is just going to add more stress to the real economy across all sectors. And whether you're buying a new house, whether you're buying a car, or just going grocery shopping, you are going to consume less. Just look at the crashing savings rate. People are saving less and less of their personal income. According to the BEA, it has gone from 4.7% in May down to 3.5% in July, which should be a national emergency. The consumer isn't strong, the economy isn't doing well, and that's why people are saving less and less. They have to spend more to survive, they're earning less because higher prices aren't going away. So the big winner here isn't the Federal Reserve, it isn't you or me, but inflation. Inflation wins again because Powell flinched and he didn't follow through. Except this time, he injected a healthy dose of fear into the economy. Inflation is about to get worse, especially when it comes to food and energy. And those are the two categories that we care about because we still need gas to get to work and food to eat to stay alive. And if we look at the CPI inflation in purple, we can see it has rebounded up 2 months in a row. It went from 3% in June to 3.7% in August. Now, a lot of people say that core inflation is dropping, and that is true. It has fallen down to 4.3% last month. However, the core CPI is still affected by higher energy prices. It affects the cost of production and wages as well. Even if you're a hairdresser and oil prices spike, you'll demand higher wages because it's more expensive simply getting to work. It will trickle down to core CPI to the services economy sooner or later. And by not hiking rates now, the Fed has essentially given up the inflation fight and opened the door up to supply shocks. And guess who has total control of the oil markets? It's Putin and the Prince. Russia and Saudi Arabia are in control. Since the start of June or July, OPEC Plus has been cutting production, forcing the price of oil to fly back above $93 a barrel. And this is very significant. It shows a unified OPEC serious about defending their revenues at all costs. They don't care if the West collapses into a recession. All they care about is keeping prices high. And this is a supply side disaster that Powell can't control. So between now and November or even December, the price of crude could spike even higher, forcing the Fed to do an emergency hike. Then the markets will really puke. And guess what? This possibility is fast becoming a reality. Russia just banned their diesel exports to the world, and prices in Europe are already jumping up. Putin just ramped up the inflation pain, and the US economy will feel the pinch, according to Reuters. Russia has banned exports of gasoline and diesel to all countries outside a circle of 4 ex-Soviet states with immediate effect in order to stabilize the domestic market. And this is going to cause a global squeeze and send fuel prices higher in the West. Both the EU and the United States could see energy inflation rebound in September. So whether Powell likes it or not, he will have to hike later this year. But because he didn't do it earlier, inflation will be higher for much longer. And I think we have to face reality. The Federal Reserve's 2% inflation target plus a soft landing is a fantasy. Now I know they can always readjust how they calculate the CPI. They might remove virtually everything so inflation could hit 0%, right? But in the real world on planet Earth where we all stand, the Federal Reserve probably will never reach its 2% target. And the only way to get it down there is to either get Biden to stop spending or to break the economy. Powell has already admitted that the economy will suffer to bring inflation down. He officially said it. We remain committed to bringing inflation back down to our 2% goal. Reducing inflation is likely to require a period of below trend growth and some softening of labor market conditions. And these are very broad, sweeping statements that are very ambiguous. Below trend growth can mean a recession, and a softening of the labor market could also mean an unemployment hell. In other words, the Fed is clueless about their next moves. They are hoping for inflation to magically come down to 2%, but OPEC Plus is not cooperating. Then we also have the threat of a US government shutdown coming. The Republicans are sick of Biden's spending bill, but if deficit spending stops, the music could very well grind to a halt. The US economy is being kept artificially alive thanks to unlimited spending, and this could be yet another black swan event. So we have to brace for impact, guys, because under these conditions, to hit 2% inflation, the Federal Reserve will likely have to crash the plane. There could be a really hard landing coming for us. But let me know what you think in the comments below. Has the Fed screwed up and can they ever regain control? Let me know in the comments below. Stay safe, be sure to smash the like button and subscribe as we navigate through these crazy times.